Ever get that feeling, when you take that first sip of strong filter coffee, like the kind you might find in Tamil Nadu, that deep, rich, almost chocolatey kickstart to your day?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Well, that's the sort of energy we're bringing to this deep dive today.
Oh, interesting.
But instead of dissecting the perfect brew, we're taking a close look at something equally potent and revealing. Tamil Nadu's very first economic survey for 2024-25.
The one that came out on March 13th, 2025.
The very same. It's like the state decided to offer us a cup of its own, strong and insightful, and give us a real taste of where things stand.
I like that analogy. It really does feel like Tamil Nadu decided to put all its cards on the table.
Right, showing us not just the winning hands, but also maybe the ones that need a bit more work.
Exactly. And that kind of open assessment, that willingness to be transparent, is pretty fascinating, especially when you're trying to understand the inner workings of a major economic player like Tamil Nadu.
Couldn't agree more. It's a chance to look beyond those flashy headlines, and all the political back and forth.
Get to the heart of it.
Yeah, to really grasp what's fueling this region. Tamil Nadu consistently performs at a high level, and I think there's a lot to learn from its economic engine.
Definitely. There are valuable lessons in there for everyone, whether you're deeply involved in business or just have a general curiosity about why some areas thrive while others struggle.
Absolutely. This exploration we're about to embark on, it's going to offer some truly surprising insights, even for those who think they have a good grasp of India's economy.
And this isn't some dusty old report that's going to sit on a shelf and be ignored. This economic survey is a first. And it signifies a genuine commitment to transparency, which I think is huge.
For sure.
It's a detailed, almost like a diagnosis of the state's economic health.
A checkup.
Exactly. And that matters to everyone. I mean, from farmers to software developers, everyone in between. It's truly setting a new standard.
Okay, so let's start by setting the stage, getting a bit of perspective. When you picture India and you look at the map, Tamil Nadu doesn't jump out as one of the largest states. Geographically speaking, it's only about 4% of the country's total land and population-wise.
Yeah, around 6%, right?
Right, so a relatively modest footprint compared to some of the other states. But here's where it gets really interesting, because in 2023-24, Tamil Nadu, this state with a comparatively smaller size, contributed a whopping 9.21% to India's total GDP.
Wow, that's a pretty significant contribution.
It is. That's a clear indication of its outsized influence, isn't it?
Definitely. I mean, when you think about it, you've got this concentration of economic activity within its borders that's producing an output way bigger than its physical or even its demographic size would suggest.
Exactly.
It really highlights just how pivotal Tamil Nadu is to the national economy.
Absolutely. And the total value of all the goods and services that were produced there, we're talking about the gross state domestic product, or GSDP, hit an impressive 27.22 lakh crore rupees in 2023-24.
That's a big number.
Oh, it is. But what's particularly striking is the speed at which Tamil Nadu's economy is expanding. The real growth rate, and this is the growth adjusted for inflation, so it gives us a clearer picture, stood at 8.33%.
Okay, so that means it's not just riding the wave of some global economic boom, right? That's actual solid growth.
That's exactly right. And what makes it even more impressive is that this isn't just a one-time surge. The economic survey points out that Tamil Nadu has consistently maintained a growth rate exceeding 8% since 2021-22.
Even while the rest of the world was kind of sputtering along.
Precisely. The global economy went through a pretty substantial slowdown in 2023, with a growth rate of around 3.33%.
So to see Tamil Nadu consistently exceeding 8% during that same period is remarkable. It really points to a strong foundation, something built to last.
It does. And it tells you that Tamil Nadu's economic performance isn't just about luck or good timing. It's rooted in sound fundamentals, that kind of consistent upward trajectory.
Speaks volumes about effective economic management, wouldn't you say?
I would absolutely say so. It also tells you something about the key sectors driving growth, their resilience and strength.
So let's talk about those key drivers. What's making this economic engine hum so effectively?
Yeah, where do we even begin? The survey highlights a few absolutely crucial areas, but first and foremost, we have to talk about Tamil Nadu's manufacturing sector. It is an absolute powerhouse.
Oh, for sure.
Contributing a significant 12.11% to India's total industrial GDP. Let that sink in for a second. More than 1/10 of the entire country's industrial output originates from Tamil Nadu.
Yeah, it really throws into perspective how dominant they are in the manufacturing space. It's not an accident either.
Right. It's not like they just stumbled into this position.
Think about Chennai, the hub for automotive industries, and then you have textile production in Tirupur and Vellore with its leather goods manufacturing. These are all centers of excellence, strategically developed over decades.
And it's a testament to the sustained investments they've made, not just in physical infrastructure, but in their workforce.
Oh, absolutely. The skill level you find in Tamil Nadu's workforce is a huge draw for businesses, both domestic and international. They've created an environment that attracts investment.
And it's not just about serving the local market either. These factories, these industries, they're deeply integrated into global supply chains. They are
Yeah.
playing on a world stage.
Which has its benefits, but as we'll see later, also carries some inherent risks.
We'll get to those, definitely. But first, let's talk about how this translates into the well-being of the people, because a strong industrial base like that has to have a positive impact, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's all about the ripple effect.
And the survey sheds light on that. The per capita income in Tamil Nadu was 2.78 lakh rupees in 2022-23.
Which, for context, is about 1.6 times the national average.
Exactly. The national average was 1.69 lakh rupees.
Yeah.
And that difference, that higher per capita income in Tamil Nadu, it usually means more higher paying jobs are available, and the overall standard of living is elevated.
It's a pretty strong indicator of their overall economic well-being. It suggests higher levels of productivity, the presence of industries that offer more value, the kind that pay better wages.
And it sets in motion this really interesting positive feedback loop. When you have a higher standard of living, better jobs. It makes the state more attractive for further investment and draws in even more skilled labor.
It becomes a self-perpetuating cycle of growth and prosperity.
And here's something that really struck me as fascinating. This economic energy in Tamil Nadu isn't confined to just one or two major cities.
You're talking about the distribution, right?
Exactly. The survey emphasizes that there are substantial contributions coming from cities like Coimbatore, Madurai, Tirupur, Tiruchirappalli, Salem, all vibrant centers in their own right.
Which is fantastic because it means the growth is spread out, more inclusive. It's not just concentrated in a single mega city.
Right. That kind of balanced development is so important, especially when it comes to making sure the benefits reach a wider population, including those in rural areas.
It can help alleviate the pressures of migration, people feeling like they have to leave their homes and move to the big city to find opportunities.
Right, exactly. It creates this network of thriving areas.
And it potentially fosters entrepreneurship at a local level. People seeing success closer to home and feeling empowered to start their own businesses.
It creates this sense of possibility across the state.
Exactly.
And of course, none of this happens by magic. Underpinning Tamil Nadu's economic success is a dedication to constant investment, not just in things like roads and power, which are important, but also in human capital.
Education and healthcare.
Those are the cornerstones. Schools, hospitals, creating a workforce that is well-educated and healthy.
And that's a major draw for businesses.
Wow.
When they're looking for a place to set up shop, they look for a workforce that's not just skilled, but also stable, reliable.
It's a signal that the state is invested in the long term.
And the survey probably delves into the specifics of these ongoing investments, because to stay competitive, especially on the global stage, you can't afford to let up.
It's a constant process of improvement and adaptation. But you brought up something important earlier about the potential risks that come with being so integrated into the global economy.
Yeah, because the economic survey doesn't just paint a rosy picture.
It's a balanced assessment.
Right. It identifies some potential challenges, some headwinds that Tamil Nadu needs to be aware of and prepared for, and reliance on the global market is a big one.
Being a major exporter is a great thing, especially when international trade is booming. But it also exposes you to all the ups and downs of the global economy.
What happens in Europe or the US, for example?
It can have a direct impact on Tamil Nadu.
A downturn in those major economies could easily ripple through and cause problems. So diversifying those export destinations.
Super important.
Yeah, and finding ways to strengthen domestic demand, so you're not solely reliant on what's happening outside your borders. Those are key strategies for mitigating that vulnerability.
Absolutely. And another significant challenge highlighted in the survey, the very real impact of climate change.
It's not just an abstract concept anymore. It's having tangible effects.
We're talking about cyclones, floods, unpredictable monsoons. These aren't just environmental concerns. They have a direct impact on the economy.
Agriculture takes a hit. transportation networks get disrupted, and suddenly you're having to invest more and more in disaster preparedness. It all adds up.
And those costs, they can really strain a state's resources.
This survey probably emphasizes this growing economic burden of climate change. It's an issue they can't afford to ignore.
And then you have the ever-present issue of inflation.
A constant struggle.
While Tamil Nadu seems to be managing it fairly well, rising prices, especially volatility in food costs.
They hit lower-income households the hardest.
And that disparity is especially pronounced in rural areas.
Absolutely. So keeping inflation in check, it's a constant balancing act. The survey might delve into the strategies the state is employing, things like improving the supply chain or implementing targeted interventions.
It's an ongoing effort. And then there's a potential point of friction that the survey brings up. The state government's concern about the borrowing limits set by the central government.
Ah, yes, that classic push and pull.
They argue that these restrictions could actually hinder some really crucial developments.
Like infrastructure projects or other vital initiatives.
It throws a bit of a political wrench into the economic discussion, doesn't it?
It does, and it's understandable. For any state government, having the freedom to invest in long-term growth, to control their own finances, those are key considerations.
It's about autonomy.
Exactly. So the fact that the survey mentions these constraints, it highlights a potential area of contention between the state and the central government. There's likely to be debate, negotiation, around economic policy and how resources are allocated.
It'll be interesting to see how that plays out, which naturally leads us to how different political groups are interpreting this first ever economic survey. The DMK, the ruling party, they're understandably focusing on the positives.
The strong growth figures, the impressive per capita income.
They're also pointing to their social welfare initiatives as evidence of successful governance. Things like the Kalanar Mahalir Uramaithidam, the provision of free electricity. They're saying, look, the numbers don't lie.
Makes sense. They want to highlight the areas where they've made progress.
And from their perspective, the survey provides data points that support their policies. The economic progress, combined with their focus on social justice, it aligns with their core values.
And the survey findings just serve to reinforce their narrative.
Of course, the opposition parties are taking a slightly different approach. They're raising questions about the sustainability of this growth. They're pointing to the level of state debt.
They're also expressing concerns about the potential vulnerabilities stemming from those global market fluctuations we discussed earlier.
And of course, they're bringing up the environmental challenges and the impact of those central government borrowing limits. Their focus is more on the potential risks and uncertainties.
Which, to be fair, the survey does acknowledge.
It does.
And that's the role of the opposition, isn't it? To provide a counterpoint, to keep things in check.
To offer a different perspective.
Exactly. By drawing attention to those areas of concern, they're essentially pushing for government accountability.
And they can use the data from the survey to back up their criticisms.
Precisely. It's a healthy dynamic.
It is. It keeps the conversation balanced. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about something really ambitious. Chief Minister M.K. Stalin's vision of turning Tamil Nadu into a $1 trillion economy by 2030.
That's a bold goal.
It's a massive leap. And the survey touches on this. To achieve that kind of target, Tamil Nadu would need to maintain an annual growth rate that exceeds 12%.
Consistently.
Year after year. And when you consider that the current GSDP is 27.22 lakh crore rupees, that's quite the acceleration they're aiming for.
It's incredibly ambitious, no doubt about that. The survey probably lays out the key strategies, the path they intend to follow.
It does. And a lot of it hinges on boosting industrial output even further, making the most of their well-established port system, and ensuring that the growth reaches all corners of the state.
That inclusive growth is key. It can't just be concentrated in a few areas.
Exactly. It's about spreading the benefits, making sure everyone feels the positive impact.
It's a massive undertaking, but it would truly position Tamil Nadu as a global economic force.
Now, I have to admit, while I was reading through some analyses of the survey, there were moments that made me chuckle.
Oh, interesting. What kind of moments?
Well, when they were talking about the dependence on global markets, there was this almost unspoken acknowledgement, like, okay, this whole thing hinges on the rest of the world not falling apart.
Like a quiet plea for global stability.
Exactly. And then when they addressed climate change, it felt like they were recognizing this powerful, unpredictable force of nature that they just have to learn to live with and manage as best they can.
A touch of realism, a little bit of humor, it helps, right?
It does. Because these are complex issues, And acknowledging the external factors, the uncertainties, it makes the whole analysis feel more grounded.
More honest.
And then there was this slightly wry tone when they discussed the fiscal constraints.
The borrowing limits.
Yeah. You could almost feel this sense of, we want to do more, but we're kind of handcuffed.
It's that tension between what the state wants to achieve and the limitations imposed by the central government.
It's a dynamic that plays out in many countries. States often feel like they have a better understanding of their specific needs.
While the central government has to focus on maintaining stability on a national level.
It's a constant negotiation.
Back and forth.
And the survey, to its credit, doesn't shy away from that reality.
It brings a certain authenticity to the discussion.
It does. But my favorite part, there was this saying, this little nugget of local wisdom that seemed to capture the essence of Tamil Nadu's economic spirit.
I'm intrigued. What was the saying?
The idea was that Tamil Nadu's economic strength comes from two key ingredients: a really good cup of strong filter coffee and a healthy dose of pure stubbornness.
I love that. It's so true. That determination, that refusal to give up, it's such a powerful force.
It's a reminder that economics isn't just about numbers and graphs and theories. It's about people.
And their spirit, their culture.
And I think that's a perfect note to end on. This deep dive into Tamil Nadu's inaugural economic survey has given us a lot to consider.
It's a really compelling snapshot of a state that's on the move, achieving some remarkable things.
A state that, despite its size, punches well above its weight in terms of economic influence.
Absolutely. And the survey, I think, lays the groundwork for future analysis. It provides those key insights into where Tamil Nadu stands today, the engines driving its growth, and the potential hurdles they need to overcome.
And it sparks so many questions. What can other states learn from Tamil Nadu's approach? How will they navigate those challenges, especially the ones tied to the global economy and climate change?
It's a fascinating case study.
It really is. And it underscores how crucial it is to have a clear development strategy, to invest wisely in key sectors, and to nurture a skilled and healthy workforce. Those are the fundamentals.
And the lessons learned here, I think, have implications far beyond Tamil Nadu. This is a story that has the potential to resonate across India and even globally.
It's a story of ambition, resilience, and a commitment to progress, fueled by, well, strong coffee and a dash of stubbornness. And I think that's something we can all raise a cup to.
Cheers to that.